Later Than Published, we join John Huntley and Lucy Meacock for Granada Tonight.
Welcome to Tuesday's Granada Tonight. In the programme, will co-op shops relocate their headquarters from the northwest to the south? Or will an appeal for government help succeed in keeping the co-op in its birthplace?
And work began today near Burnley on a wind-powered electricity generating project. But is it environmentally friendly or another threat to the region's shrinking countryside?
That's to come, but we begin tonight with sad news. The relatives and friends of 7 people from the northwest who died in the Nepal air crash are in mourning. 35 British passengers died when the Pakistan International Airlines flight crashed as it approached Kathmandu airport. It's the second Airbus crash in the area in 2 months. Mark Owen reports.
76-year-old Laura Strutt from Chirk in Clwyd was a regular traveller to Nepal. She was an active charity worker and on this last fateful trip had been taking equipment to a school. 167 people died when the flight crashed into a mountainside. Heavy rain today hampered attempts to clear up the wreckage. The plane, travelling from Karachi, was 1,500 feet below its prescribed flight path when it approached Kathmandu. 4 climbers from the Plaza Brenin Mountaineering Centre in Snowdonia were among the victims.
Obviously everybody was totally devastated and still are. We haven't really come to terms with just what it's meant to the place. It's left a massive hole in our instructional staff, as well as losing a lot of very close friends.
The doors remain closed at the Manchester home of 28-year-old health worker Pam Muttram today. She'd been travelling to Nepal for a climbing holiday. The 7th victim was PE lecturer Brian Rowlands from Didsbury in Manchester.
That report from Mark Owen. Hundreds of jobs and a slice of northern history are hanging in the balance. The Cooperative Retail Society, or the Co-op as we know it, was born in Rochdale 150 years ago. It's now based in Manchester but wants to move its headquarters back to its birthplace. It would mean 800 jobs for Rochdale, but the Co-op says without more money from the government, the jobs may go south. Could the Co-op really move out of the northwest? Andy Gill has been finding out.
When the Rochdale pioneers opened the first cooperative shop in 1844, they can have had little idea of how their movement would grow into a multi-million-pound business. Cooperative Retail Services say they'll build a new £26 million headquarters in a rundown part of Rochdale, so long as the government provides £6 million in grants. But the government have so far only offered £2 million, and today a delegation from Rochdale lobbied the minister to improve that offer.
It's the region, really, that we want to push, as much as we're pushing for Rochdale as Rochdale councillors. We want to push for the North West as well.
The movement may have been born in Rochdale, but in the hard-headed 90s, Cooperative Retail Services say if the government grant is not increased, their new headquarters will go elsewhere. They've already looked at one possible site in Swindon of all places.
Cooperative Retail's chief executive says he does understand the historical appeal of Rochdale.
Emotively, it would be an excellent thing if we could move, but emotions don't run businesses, or at least they shouldn't. And whilst it's a major part of our consideration, we must get the financial aspects right as well.
400 people would transfer from the present Manchester headquarters and 400 new jobs would be created in Rochdale. After last week's redundancies across the region, their jobs the North West can ill afford to lose to Swindon or anywhere else. Today's delegation left the ministerial meeting feeling positive, but left with no promises.
Andy Gill there. Other news, and police and community leaders are appealing for calm on the streets of Salford tonight after a second night of disturbances in which 2 policemen were injured and a car set on fire. As Trevor Green reports, the trouble broke out a mile from the scene of similar violence in Salford last July.
St James Road in the Higher Broughton area of Salford was the scene of the latest troubles for the past 2 nights. Youths stoned police and firemen after setting fire to cars.
I think it's emotive to describe it as a riot. We had 30 to 40 youths throwing stones at police cars and then later at the fire brigade.
Some bystanders became caught up in the trouble, but blame excessive force by police.
My wife, she's pregnant, and she screamed at them that she was pregnant, and I screamed at her, but they were just pushing us out of the way.
Police say they'll investigate any complaints, but stress that officers in riot gear were needed to deal with the scale of violence. Extra police will be on patrol in the Higher Broughton area tonight.
And some news just in. A man has been rescued from the wreckage of a house in Birkenhead this evening after it was demolished by an explosion. The 58-year-old man's been taken to Arrow Park Hospital from the house in Melford Close with extensive burns to his arms and body. 2 other people have been treated for shock at the scene. Gas board officials are now investigating the cause of the blast.
Hundreds of students in Manchester are being put up in hotels because of a shortage of university accommodation. Around 300 first-year students are getting bed and breakfast at 10 hotels, including the 4-star Britannia in the city centre. The university, which is trying to house an extra 200 students this year, says it's negotiated special cut-price deals. It's hoping to find them rooms in student residence in the next fortnight.
Football now, and Manchester United are out of the UEFA Cup after having lost their first-round tie against Torpedo Moscow on penalties. The two sides played almost 4 hours of football and had to decide the match in a nail-biting finish. United's hopes of progressing to the next round after a goalless 90 minutes were dashed when Mark Hughes was sent off 2 minutes before the end of normal time for a second bookable offence. Earlier, they'd come close to breaking the deadlock through Robson, and then Webb, who struck a post 10 minutes later. Both sides missed 2 early penalties and needed Brian Robson back after a long injury to keep them in the game. Moscow went ahead by 4 penalties to 3, and it was left to Gary Pallister to try to even the scores. And this is what happened.
Exciting stuff. Well, now, work on Britain's biggest wind farm has begun in Lancashire despite protests from local people that the project is an eyesore. It's a venture involving 3 main developers, including 2 electricity companies, who say it will provide clean energy. But as Tim Wyatt reports, some opponents argue it's a price not worth paying.
Most electricity is generated by traditional power stations burning fossil fuels like coal and oil and pumping thousands of tons of toxins and greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Renewable energy sources like wind power are cleaner and greener, though critics say they disfigure some of Britain's most spectacular scenery. High on a hill overlooking Burnley, work has begun on Lancashire's first attempt to harness wind power. It'll be generating electricity within months. By next February, there'll be 24 of these 150-foot-tall wind turbines sprouting out of this bleak Lancashire landscape. This will be Britain's biggest wind farm. The 100-foot fiberglass blades will spin round the clock, producing enough power for 7,500 homes. That's roughly a third of the population of Burnley. It's all costing £11 million, and it has a lifespan of around 20 years.
This is one of the better sites in England. Indeed, obviously, the windier the site, the more energy you get, and therefore these are the sort of sites which will be developed first. We believe that there is the potential to generate about 20% of our electricity from renewable sources such as the wind. And in the UK, we have 50% of Europe's resource. We're very rich in this particular resource.
Not everyone's as enthusiastic as the developers, however. Locally, there's been stringent opposition to turbines on the landscape.
It's supposed to be an area of outstanding natural beauty. We had planning permission for a garage turned down because it would spoil the skyline, and yet they're willing to put all these windmills up at the top.
People living nearby also complain that heavy construction lorries are causing damage and disruption as they negotiate narrow country roads en route to the site.
Tim Wyatt there. Talking of change, when I were a lad, playgrounds were nothing more than a bit of concrete with a few swings and a broken seesaw if you were lucky. These days, as a parent I know this, they've got the lot. Adventure playgrounds with climbing frames, assault courses and a nice soft landing for the kids. That's the most important bit. But have you ever heard of a playground that sounds good? Our playboy Fred has been to Bolton to investigate.
Isn't this great? Playgrounds were never like this when I was a child. It's designed for all types of kids, even disabled children. These plants behind me all smell. But look over here. If you love making a noise, all these things, just move in here, you hit the bits of wood, and it's noisy, and you make tunes, so I can go around making as much noise as I want. And over here, I've never seen one of these before. It's a sort of, a board. As you rock on it, it squeaks, it plays tunes. I